So Ian, thank you for spending time to speak to Kaplan this morning. We're excited to have you. Let's start a little bit about understanding like where you're from, what you do.
Sure. So I'm the CEO of Edelman in Southeast Asia and Australia. I look after 6 markets across the region. I studied an economics degree and an arts degree. I was a pretty average student, but I had a lot of fun and joy and love what I do now.
How is PR different culturally if I were to compare, say, in Singapore versus some of the other regions that you look after?
From a Southeast Asia perspective, when I look across the different markets, the difference is predominantly around the maturity of the media and the proliferation of other channels. So Indonesia is the capital of Twitter, basically. It's where it's happening, and if you're not heavily engaged in that space, you're really not going to understand what's happening and where the conversations are happening, and you've got to fish where the fish are, and that's where they are in Indonesia. In Vietnam, you've got media ownership by the government of 90%, and so there's a different management of story and management of process in a place like Vietnam. In Malaysia, you've got one of the most realistically democratic press and aggressive press in the whole region, and they're feisty and they're punchy and they're very enjoyable to deal with. In Singapore, and what I like about Singapore, because it's got a lot of similarities from my work in the UAE, is that media in Singapore is viewed not as the fourth estate to hold everyone accountable. It's there as part of building the nation. People see it as a powerful force for articulating the story of Singapore, challenging people around their behaviour, but it's not a sort of a tabloid press in any way, shape or form. Yes, it enjoys the celebrity like the rest of us do, but it's really got a different function, and when you understand that function, you change and adapt the way you engage with media as a core thing.
So where does PR fit in the grander scheme of things?
Sure. So, in terms of looking at careers and opportunities in the communications world, and it's broad now, but if you're on agency side, you've got PR agencies, digital agencies, social media agencies, experiential agencies, events agencies, creative agencies, media buying agencies. There's a lot of agencies out there. Yeah. On the client side, predominantly there's sort of 3 worlds of which communications exists in. You've got the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer, the CCO, the Chief Communications Officer, and the CEO. Each one of them, those people have a different role as it relates to communication. And they predominantly, it's still silo-based, have people working for them, helping them do different things. So what's happening, because what we're seeing is on an agency basis, everyone's racing to the middle. It used to be a lot of times communications in the idea of from a product or a marketing perspective, organizations would go to an agency, build take 9 months, do an amazing 30-second TV spot, charge us a bucket load of money, and let's hope that we can sell more things. The reality of today is that young people are not sitting down watching TV in the way that they used to. They're skipping ads. They're consuming majority of their content out of Facebook, out of YouTube, using search, using things like Snapchat. And so where does a 30-second ad sit in that sort of space? Why we think, and PR is about to enter in and isn't into a golden age, is that there is huge amounts of content coming out of the world at the moment, and increasingly every piece of content is much more in a sort of 24/7 storytelling sort of facet and factor and structure. And as communications, as PR people, traditional PR people, we've been telling stories all the time, and we respond to stories happening now, in the afternoon, tomorrow morning and at night, versus waiting 9 months to build a beautiful advert. And so, golden age of PR, yes, definitely, hopefully, fingers crossed for the sake of my business, it needs to be. But I think what I'm seeing is that so core principles, good ideas come from everywhere. People are consuming information in different ways. They're consuming so much more information. So PR has a really key role and a clear role in cutting stories in a much more simpler and easy to consume way, reacting in a faster way in telling stories, responding to issues as they're happening. I think obviously the very sad things that happened in Paris and all around the world. The way that story is proliferating is predominantly led by PR sort of engagement.
Yeah, and so this brings me to my next question about tools in PR. Obviously, the tools have evolved over time, and now with new media and accessibility, and you talked about being 24/7 in your response. What's kind of the go-to tool, if I could put it that way?
The go-to sort of emerging tool set is analytics and predictive content. So I can look at a issue and say, okay, the future of education in Singapore. I can now go and see, using a whole variety of different tools, predominantly social-led tools, I can identify who in Singapore is talking about the future of education.
Right.
And I can identify them down to an individual. I can go and talk to Facebook and I can identify them on Facebook. I can then identify them down to a geography. And we might see that here in Bugis that it's a hotbed of intellectual engagement around the future of education. And obviously it is because we're here at Kaplan. And so you can identify, you can see what they're saying, and I can also see what they say on, say, their social channel and who picks it up. And so who's the idea starter, who then takes that idea and then spreads it or amplifies the idea, who then comments on it. So you can build a very clear set of influencers who are talking about the future of education, and you can give them very specific content. So the tool set is about analytics to determine what content works, who the people are you want to get to, and then you tell the story through a whole variety of different channels across a huge surface area. And surface area is the other part of the sort of future thinking of communications. And by that we mean your owned property of your Facebook and your Twitter, your relationship with a BuzzFeed or a Huffington Post, or an SMRT on Facebook. What's your sort of media relations like with them? What's your traditional media relations like with the 10 journalists who are important at Straits Times? So you've got to look at this whole space versus press relations as a core thing.
Great. And I guess any words of advice for aspiring journalists or spokespeople or anybody who wants to do PR?
Yep. What
would you tell them?
Listen, I love it. I have a fantastic job. I work for an amazing company. It's a family company. There's 6,000 of us around the world. We're the world's largest PR agency, 67 offices. And I've seen the world on the back of it. I've worked for royal families. I've flown in private jets. I've been to opening of the Olympics. I've done a lot of cool, fun stuff. So there's a lot of cool, fun stuff out there. And as my dad said to me, you want a job where someone will pay for you to see the world. And in the agency, in the PR world, it's not a bad space. And also, I find that every day I go to work and I'm exposed to 20 different things or 30 different things, and across a whole variety of different industries. So it's the variety, it's the opportunity. And increasingly, this is a world that's not going away. It's not getting any smaller. You can, there's consolidation around the agency model, but every organisation now has to work so much harder to get their story out. They have to work so much harder to keep customers loyal. They have to work so much harder to find new employees. And how do you do all of that? Via the power of communications. So it's a good long-term bet as a career. And it's a hell of a lot of fun.
Thank you very much, Ian.